I had always believed that love and family were sacred, that a mother's devotion could shield a child from any hardship, that the sacrifices I made day in and day out would build a bond unbreakable by time or circumstance. And for years, that belief defined me. After my husband passed away unexpectedly, leaving me alone with my little boy, Ion, I devoted every fiber of my being to raising him, working long hours, skipping sleep, and swallowing my own loneliness so that he would never feel the absence of a father, telling myself that my sacrifices were invisible threads weaving the safety net of his happiness, that every tear I held back, every missed moment of rest, every silent dinner alone was worth it if it meant he grew up loved, secure, and proud of his mother. Yet despite my vigilance, life had a cruel way of reminding me that control is an illusion. Because Ramin entered our lives when Ion was barely 8, with a smile that seemed to melt every wall I had built around my heart, with attention so disarming it made me lower my guard, and I welcomed him, believing my son deserved a male figure to guide him, someone who could teach him things I could not, someone to fill a void I feared I could never fill. But I never noticed the small cracks appearing, the subtle undermining of my authority, the gentle manipulation of my son's affections, the way he praised every suggestion he made as if my thoughts were secondary, the way my efforts at bedtime stories or helping with homework were met with a distracted smile while Ramin's advice was eagerly absorbed, until the day I realized my little boy's adoration was shifting, slipping into the hands of someone who had never earned it the way I had. The truth hit me during what should have been the happiest day of his young life, his graduation ceremony, the day I imagined bursting with pride, the day he would walk across that stage and look at me with the same awe I had always seen in his eyes, the day I expected him to acknowledge the years of sleepless nights, the dinners made with love, the sacrifices I had quietly endured. But instead, as the auditorium filled with applause and proud parents, my son approached the microphone with a confidence that shone brighter than any light in that room, and in a voice steady and sincere, he thanked Ramin, his stepfather, for guiding him, supporting him, and loving him. And for a moment, the air left my lungs, my heart seemed to freeze, I could barely recognize the boy I had raised, the son who had once clung to me in fear of losing me, now publicly placing another man above me, my entire existence in his eyes overshadowed by someone who had inserted himself so quietly and seamlessly into our lives, and I felt a storm of betrayal, disbelief, and heartbreak. Yet amidst the pain, a strange clarity emerged. I realized that no amount of tears, explanations, or arguments could reclaim the affection that had shifted, and in that moment of excruciating clarity, I made a choice to preserve my dignity, my self-respect, and the love I had always held for myself. So I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the polished floor, walked out of the auditorium, past the confused faces, past the whispers, past the son who did not yet understand, and for the first time in years, I made a decision purely for me, leaving behind the life I had built, the boy I had loved unconditionally, and the man who had betrayed not just me, but the very essence of our family. And as I walked away, each step became a quiet declaration of strength, a promise to myself that I would not let heartbreak define me, that I would rise from this betrayal stronger, wiser, and unstoppable, even if it meant leaving everything I had ever known behind. For sometimes the hardest choice is also the bravest, and that day, I chose courage over comfort, pride over pain, and my own life over a shadow of a family that no longer reflected my love. The moment I left, the world felt colder, emptier, as if every corner of my life was echoing the absence of my son and the betrayal I had endured. My home, once warm with laughter and memories, now seemed suffocating, each object a reminder of the life I had loved and the love I had lost. And though part of me ached to turn back, to confront Ramin, to demand the place that had been mine for years, another part, stronger now, whispered that my dignity mattered more than his approval or my son's fleeting admiration for a man who had never truly earned it. So I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, modest and cramped, but mine, a sanctuary where I could breathe, think, and rebuild. And the nights were the hardest, stretching endlessly with memories and regrets. Yet gradually, I began to fill the emptiness with purpose, taking freelance work that demanded my skill and focus, pouring myself into it until the hours disappeared and my mind, though tired, felt alive. And I volunteered at local schools, guiding children who had no one to cheer for them, no one to listen when life seemed unfair. And in their eyes, I found a reflection of the love I had for Ion, the same pride, the same hope, and slowly, My pain began to transform into power. Each small victory, each thank you, each smile from a child I had helped become a quiet affirmation that my value was never dependent on someone else's recognition. And I realized that revenge need not be dramatic or humiliating. It could be subtle. It could be a life lived fully, fiercely, and with unwavering self-respect. So I ignored the whispers that eventually reached me, people speaking of Ramin flaunting his role, posting pictures with Ayan, calling himself the perfect father, and instead of confronting him, I made my own choice, to rise above, to focus on building a life so rich and full that their attempts to overshadow me would seem hollow, inconsequential, and futile, and I enrolled in an advanced university program I had once only dreamed of, pushing myself into uncharted territories of knowledge and opportunity, networking with people who inspired me, connecting with mentors who believed in me, and watching my confidence grow with every new accomplishment, while my heart, though scarred, began to beat with pride not for someone else, not for recognition from my son or anyone else, but for the woman I was becoming, independent, strong, unyielding, and unapologetically ambitious, and with each step, I could feel the weight of betrayal lifting, replaced with determination, with a sense of purpose that no one could steal, no one could diminish, and even though there were days when I missed Ayan unbearably, when I longed to hold him close and hear him call me Mom, I understood that leaving had been the only way to preserve both of our futures, and in that understanding, I found peace. And I swore to myself that my life would be a testament to resilience, a living example that no act of betrayal could ever define me, and that sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is not a confrontation or a public vindication, but the quiet, unshakable rebuilding of one's soul, one's identity, and one's dreams. And as I settled into my new life, I felt a spark of hope ignite, the knowledge that while I had lost a chapter of my life, an entire new story was waiting for me to write, full of strength, success, and the undeniable proof that I was more than any loss, more than any betrayal, more than anyone's narrow perception of me, and slowly, steadily, I rose from the ashes of my heartbreak, stronger, wiser, and ready to claim the life that was always mine. Years passed, and in that passage of time, I transformed the pain of betrayal into a life of resilience and undeniable success. Each morning I woke with purpose, each evening I reflected on how far I had come. And slowly the quiet ache of leaving Ayan behind became tempered by pride in what I had built with my own hands, my career blossoming beyond anything I had dared to dream, my reputation growing, my influence spreading to places I had once only imagined, and yet, the sweetest satisfaction came not from accolades alone but from the knowledge that Ramin, the man who had tried to claim my son's admiration and diminish my role in his life, was powerless to touch the life I had reconstructed, powerless to undermine the woman I had become. And it was during an invitation to a prestigious award ceremony honoring contributions to education and mentorship that the culmination of my quiet revenge presented itself, a moment I could have never predicted but had longed for in secret, and as I stepped onto the grand stage, the lights illuminating my face and the audience settling into attentive silence, I saw a familiar figure in the crowd, Ramin, seated in a posture that had once exuded confidence but now radiated unease, flanked by Ayan, my son, who had grown into a man whose admiration for his stepfather had never fully replaced the lessons and love I had imparted. And as I began to speak, recounting stories of children I had guided, obstacles I had overcome, and the transformative power of determination and self-respect, the room absorbed every word, hanging on my experiences, my triumphs, and my resilience, and though I never mentioned Ramin or Ayan directly, every sentence carried the weight of my journey, the silent acknowledgement of the betrayal I had endured and the strength I had cultivated, and I watched as Ramin's composure faltered, the smugness that had once defined him replaced by a recognition of the woman he had underestimated, and in that subtle shift, I felt the first true taste of satisfaction, the realization that my life, full and independent, was a triumph he could never claim or diminish, and that my quiet, unwavering perseverance was the most potent revenge of all, a life lived so fully and authentically that it rendered his attempts at superiority meaningless, and as the applause filled the room, I felt a surge of liberation, a profound affirmation that I had not just survived heartbreak but had transformed it into power, influence, and inspiration, that I had become an embodiment of resilience, a woman who had walked away from betrayal and had not looked back, and that the life I now led was unassailable, vibrant, and deeply satisfying, and as I stepped off the stage, receiving congratulations from colleagues, strangers, and admirers alike, I realized that my revenge had never been about humiliation or confrontation, but about rising above, about creating a legacy so strong that it overshadowed any attempt to diminish me. And as I returned home that night, I allowed myself a small, victorious smile, knowing that while I had lost moments with my son, I had gained a life of purpose, strength, and undeniable success, and that no one, not even Ramin, could ever take from me the woman I had fought so hard to become, a woman who had turned heartbreak into triumph, betrayal into power, and pain into the sweetest, most enduring revenge imaginable. Years later, long after the sting of betrayal had dulled into a quiet ache and my life had taken shape in ways I had once only dreamed of, I received a letter, carefully written, the familiar handwriting immediately recognizable as Ion's, and as I unfolded it, a flood of memories washed over me, memories of sleepless nights, whispered prayers, and the small joys of raising him, and I realized that despite the distance and the choices we had made, the bond between mother and son had never truly vanished, for even in the absence of daily life together, the love had endured, though transformed, tempered by time, experience, and growth, and Ion's words were hesitant at first, tinged with regret and uncertainty, acknowledging that the words he had spoken at his graduation, praising Ramin above me, had hurt me deeply, yet he admitted that as a young boy he had been influenced, confused, and yearning for guidance, and he confessed that despite the years apart, he had never forgotten the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had stayed awake, the tears I had swallowed, and the love I had poured into him selflessly, and my heart ached and soared all at once as I read his apology, the quiet admission of a young man realizing the depth of a mother's love too late, and I smiled, not with bitterness, but with understanding, choosing to respond not with anger or recrimination, but with compassion and grace, writing back to remind him that I had always been proud of him, that forgiveness was already given, and that my life had been filled with joy, achievements, and love even in the spaces he had left behind, and as I sealed the envelope, I felt a profound sense of peace, a calm I had not known in years, for walking away from that life, from the shadow of a man who had sought to replace me and a son who had faltered in understanding, had been the bravest act of my life, and it had allowed me to cultivate a life so full, so rich, and so undeniably my own that no one's betrayal could touch it, no one's absence could diminish it. And as I reflected on all I had accomplished, the respect earned, the lives touched, the strength rebuilt, I realized the true sweetness of revenge had never been in hurting anyone, never in proving them wrong, but in proving to myself that I was enough, that my love, my resilience, and my spirit were unassailable, and in that realization, I understood that my journey, though painful, had led me to the most profound form of freedom, the ability to love myself fully, to honor my own worth, and to walk through life with dignity, courage, and unshakable confidence. And while I would always carry the memories of the son I had raised and the man who had tried to undermine me, I had emerged not broken, but radiant, triumphant, and whole, and in choosing to forgive without returning, to love without clinging, to walk away without regret, I discovered that the greatest victory, the sweetest revenge, and the deepest fulfillment all resided not in the eyes of others, but in my own. In the knowledge that I had turned heartbreak into strength, betrayal into a lesson of self-worth, and abandonment into the most extraordinary gift, a life lived entirely on my own terms, a life that no one could ever diminish, take away, or overshadow, and that realization, more than any accolade or recognition, brought me a peace so complete that I knew I had finally, truly, and irrevocably won.